Welcome to the Sports Show. This is the first playoff edition. We're in the wild card round, and in our first matchup this week, we have the Oakland Raiders going into Houston, facing off against the Texans. Brian, good to see you.
Yep, always fun. Back at it, Revolutionary Sports Show. 2 different locations.
2 different locations as usual, but we're back talking about, like I said, the Raiders and the Texans. Brian, who do you have in this matchup?
Well, this one is going to be probably the trashiest of the playoff matchups. You're looking at it, and you got potentially a third-string quarterback in Connor Cook starting for the Raiders. Then you got the semi-backup. He was a starter, then came back to being a starter after he was a backup because Tom Savage gets injured. So you have your boy, Brock Osweiler, starting out there. He hasn't looked real good, and then Matt McGloin limited in practice. It's uncertain whether he's going to start or Connor Cook will. I think they're pretty equal at that point with taking both first-team reps. If Matt McGloin's taking first-team reps and Connor Cook's taking first-team reps, I've got to think, that Connor Cook has been practicing with the first team all week. He should know what to expect. And then Matt McGloin says limited in practice. So, he hasn't been taking a lot of reps with the first team. Then you're looking at it on the other side of the ball, Brock Osweiler. He's been trying to get back into it. And I don't know if his confidence is going to be up there or not, because I think it took a big hit to his self-confidence when they put him back on the bench. And he probably thought, I'm making all this money. I was supposed to be the guy. And now Tom Savage is coming in, and now they're only using him because he's really all they've got. With Brandon Weeden backing him up, there's not a whole lot of options there. So at this point, the Raiders have not looked good as of late. They struggled and ended up in a wild card spot because they just couldn't maintain what they had going. And everybody thought it might have been the Raiders' defense that kept them in games, and then Derek Carr goes out. Now look at him. So I think Derek Carr was the key to the Raiders' season. Now that he's out, it's on the road. I just don't think they're going to be able to move the ball with either McGloin or Connor Cook. Maybe put up 10 points or so, but I think the Texans are going to edge them out in this one. What do you see in this one?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. It's going to be rough. The 12-4 Oakland Raiders are not going to look anything like a 12-win team this weekend. It's Derek Carr had been holding up that team. Him, Amari Cooper, and Michael Crabtree is really – that's what's been having them going all season long. It's been able to cover up how awful that defense really is. One of the worst defenses, I believe, the bottom 10 in pretty much every statistical defensive category throughout the whole season. And their high-powered offense is really what led them to the record that they have. What led them to their hot start is Derek Carr's inability to turn the ball over. He just didn't have many turnovers, lots of touchdowns, and covered up how their run game wasn't really that dominant. They were just able to move the ball, able to get first downs, and now without Derek Carr in the mix, McGloin just isn't very good, as well as Connor Cook, your boy from Michigan State, also probably not going to be able to get it done against this Texans defense. This Texans defense is one of the best, possibly the best defense in the NFL. It's elevated its game ever since J.J. Watt got injured early on in the season, and with how awful Brock Osweiler has been, bottom 3 total yards and passing and scoring offense. The defense has really led them to, although it's only 9-7 and they won a weaker division in the NFL, it's still playoff berth. They still have a great defense, and not meaning that lightly. It's probably the second best defense behind the Seahawks defense in the playoffs right now. But in playoff time, I'm always willing to go with the better defense, playing at home in front of their home crowd. And it doesn't really matter if Osweiler or whoever is starting for the Texans. It really doesn't matter who's starting for the Raiders. The next round, they're probably heading to New England anyway to get beat up by Tom Brady and that team. So I'm going with the Texans in this one. Just the better defense has my attention. And if somebody's able to score on the Raiders, usually playoff games are close games. So I'm going with the better defense in this one.
Yeah, then we got the next matchup. It absolutely pains me to see these two facing off in the first round of the playoffs. The goal every year is to have them face off in the NFC Championship. So at that point, I know one of my teams is going to the Super Bowl. But we got the Lions at the Seahawks. Corey, what do you see in this one?
Well, as anybody that watches the show knows that we're both super humongous, gigantic Seahawks fans. But if you also watch the show, you know that Brian is quite the Detroit Lions fan, and we won't hold that against him because we know in Brian's heart where his loyalty truly lies, and he's a Seattle fan at the end of the day. So, but with that being said, I'm sure you are as well, relatively hard on the Seahawks, and we really have to get the running game going. It's discouraging to see Rawls have good weeks and bad weeks, and the run game just not get going. Even with C. Mike now in Green Bay, it wasn't really going when he was our starting running back, and it's still not really going now that he's gone. And that's worrisome. Alex Collins is doing a decent job, has been finding some holes and been playing better than Rawls, but it always seems like our backup running back maybe just has something more to prove. It just usually outplays the starter more cases than not. It happened with Marshawn when T. Rawls was there a couple years ago, and it happened with C. Mike when Rawls was there. And so, now we're seeing Alex Collins having some minor success back there, and even CJ Prosise had a great outing when he got his chance against New England. But what it's really going to come down to is, are we going to get back to giving Jimmy Graham the ball? We were 7-2-1 when Jimmy was over 60 yards, 5, 6, 8 catches, whatever it was, and he was really dominating the offense. Back when we were winning games like that, and it was really only Jimmy moving the ball down the field, it was worrisome to me because when Jimmy gets covered, nobody else was really doing anything. The run game wasn't really doing anything. No other receivers was really doing anything. Jermaine was invisible as he usually is, and Doug was, he hasn't really gotten off to the start that he did last year. And that was one of those career years you never expect anything like that. But what's looking good for the Hawks is we had one game where our defense just looked atrocious and our offense was able to play well in that Cardinals game. But I think the defense is solid. Like I said, I think they're the best defense in the game, and even without Earl Thomas. And I think that they're going to do fine, especially with a one-dimensional team like the Lions. The Lions have really struggled to move the ball on the ground. They've been trying. They've tried everything. Zach Zenner is a decent running back. He's not great, but he's probably the best thing that they have. Theo Riddick was doing a decent job, but never really took off at any level of the game. He wasn't a great pass catcher. He wasn't a great rusher, but they had. Now Zenner is doing a good job on the ground, also doing a good job catching the ball. I figured the job would go to Dwayne Washington with the job wide open. Not a whole ton of talent back there, but he hasn't been able to do anything either. He really had some success in the preseason, but it just goes to show that how different the preseason and the regular season is. And now that the regular season is over, we're going to see how much different the regular season is than the playoffs. And the Seahawks are just a team that their core has gone further into the playoffs, and it's something that I think later on in the playoffs will be a problem for Dallas, be a problem maybe even for the Giants. Is they don't have a ton of guys that have that deep playoff experience, and it's just a different game in the playoffs than it is in regular season. Games are generally really close. You don't see very many blowouts in a playoff game, in a playoff atmosphere. No matter if it's home or away, usually comes down to the last drive or two. And when you have Russell Wilson, I'm confident every single time in what he can do late in the game with however much time is left. So, as you'd expect, I'm going with the Seahawks, and it's gonna be interesting. The Lions usually don't play well on the road. They've lost to 4 of their 5 losses on the road have been all to playoff teams: Green Bay, Houston, and a couple other teams. But I just don't want anybody coming into Seattle and beating the Seahawks 7-1 at home. Only lost to division rival Cardinals, and in a game that I don't know why they can't just go undefeated at home. They usually win one of those late Christmas, after Christmas games, and that's just what it was. And I don't think that another team, especially a non-conference team, Seahawks only team in the NFC that haven't lost a non-divisional game, and I don't think this is going to be any different. Although we love big play Slay over there holding it down for the Lions defense, they really don't have a whole lot of firepower back there to stop either the run game or the pass game. So I'm confident in our offense really getting rolling. And to be honest, I'm a little happy that we have a wild card game. I was so pumped to get a first round bye, but I don't think that we're playing well enough to be confident in having a week off and then getting our team back going. So I like this whole wild card game. And plus, it's boring when you don't get to watch the Hawks for a week at a time. The bye week was terrible, so I'm glad we don't get another one of those. So what do you think about this game, Brian?
Yeah, I still think it's one of the worst scenarios ever. I mean, sure, one of my teams is going to win, but one of them was going to lose, and I wanted them both to advance through the first round. But looking at this game, the big key was Earl Thomas going out for the Hawks, and I know they're still trying to figure it out in their secondary. And you got guys like Elliott stepping in, and he's actually played pretty well at corner, and you can just see these guys out there trying to piece it all together, learn the system. They haven't really started before, and now they're trying to get in there and just learn the whole system of the Hawks and where Earl should have been. And nobody's going to be able to step in and beat Earl Thomas. Let's face it. It's just not going to happen. And then guys are just going to step in and try to do their best. And it's just, that old saying, next man up. And that's the whole thing that the Seahawks need to learn. And they really need to start gelling for the playoffs because nobody's really giving them a shot. And nobody's really giving the Lions a shot either. And I think the winner of this one could be dangerous, but I think the key in this one isn't really the run games or anything of that sort. It's whether Matt Stafford can pick apart these guys that are the young guys in the Seahawks secondary. If he can, we've seen him come out explosive, pick apart defenses. If that's the Matt Stafford that we're going to see, the Seahawks could be in trouble. But then you got Zach Zenner. He's just starting to figure it out. And they're just kind of rotating backs because you got Theo Riddick. He goes out. They just recently re-signed Joique Bell. He's just more of a special teams guy. And Zach Zenner's the guy. And I don't think that he's really a Pro Bowl quality back. And like you said, Dwayne Washington, there's high hopes for him at UW. He got beat out by Myles Gaskin, gets on the Lions, and then he has a big run in the preseason. I believe it was 80 yards or something like that for a touchdown. Everybody got excited about him. He gets injured, never really does anything when he's healthy. So Zach Zenner is going to be the guy that's going to be up against the Seahawks defense. Personally, I don't think the Lions have it in them to come out and beat the Seahawks. The Lions need this win more than the Hawks do. They haven't won a playoff game in something crazy, over 20 years, I believe. So I don't remember the Lions ever winning a playoff game when I was watching, and should have happened a couple years ago, but the refs got involved with Jerry Jones and threw a flag, picked it up, called no pass interference after actually calling the penalty. So see what happens this time, and I think it should be a good game. Two teams that have really struggled down the stretch and just haven't really looked like themselves, but like you said, they can get some momentum going into the playoffs, and I think whichever team comes out of this one could really get some momentum going. But personally, I have to go with the Seahawks. They're 8-point favorites at home, and out-of-division opponents don't come into CenturyLink Field and win. And in-division opponents, they play each other twice a year. They know exactly how they play. They know exactly what's coming next. Lions don't see the Hawks a whole lot, and the last time we saw them was a Monday night game. Calvin Johnson fumbled on the goal line out the back of the end zone. That's how that game ended. I think this one should be similar and not a whole lot of offense unless Matt Stafford can come pick apart the defense. But on the other side, you got Glover Quinn, big play Slay. That's my guy, trying to keep the Lions going and keep the Lions in the playoffs. But historically, they have not been a good team on the road and not a good team in the playoffs, especially on the road. And that's the situation for the Lions here. I wouldn't be disappointed to see the Lions do it because they need this win more than probably anybody else outside the Bengals would need a playoff win. But Adam Pac-Man Jones arrested again. The Bengals probably won't do much for a while. So this is the Lions' chance to prove that they're better than the Bengals and that they actually can get a playoff win. But unfortunately, I think the Hawks are going to do it. And I think the Hawks historically also very, very well at home, especially in wild card rounds. I think the last time they lost at home was 0-2 or 0-3 against the Rams when the Rams beat them for the third time that year. And that was a division opponent as well. So you're looking at it. Lions, I think they're going to play them close, but they also played the Packers close last week at home. They ended up losing. So I'm going to go with the Hawks, but if the Lions do come out with the win, I'm not going to be disappointed about it.
I see. Not going to be disappointed. Well, we're both going with the Hawks. I'm pretty sure anybody who watches this show knew that that's the exact way we're going, and that's the way everyone should go because that's what's going to happen. So moving over back to the AFC, we have the Dolphins taking on the Steelers. Are going to be a different game. Unfortunately, from Miami, I believe Tannehill is done for the year, rolling with Matt Moore and Jay Ajayi. Brian, who do you got in this game?
Yeah, I know Jay Ajayi has really surprised some people this year. Really just came out of nowhere. And Jay Ajayi, I think you said he's going to be the key for Miami because you don't really have much else. You have Matt Moore starting at quarterback. Tannehill, he wasn't the guy either. He was okay. He was better than Matt Moore was. And now we're looking at this team, and I believe they played at the Steelers, and it didn't work out for them before, maybe last week, a couple weeks ago. And I know that they may have gotten a win against the Steelers if I am correct, but this one's at the Steelers in the playoffs with Matt Moore, and that one I just don't really see the Dolphins doing much in this game. People might have bit a little bit on the fact that the Browns almost beat the Steelers last week, but Landry Jones is not, in my opinion, an NFL quarterback, and then he went out there and still beat the Browns. We saw him do that fake field goal years ago against the Seahawks, threw it straight up in the air and got picked off. And that's just kind of what quarterback Landry Jones is. So hopefully Big Ben doesn't go out for the Steelers' sake. If he goes out, I'm taking the Dolphins. But Ben Roethlisberger, I believe he's starting. And then you got Le'Veon Bell, Michigan State's finest out there, just running over people, hurdling people. He's one of the most patient backs in the league. It's crazy. He gets the ball, and instead of running straight into the line, he kind of waits a little bit, hesitates, and then hits the hole. Goes outside, does the same thing, just kind of waits for something to develop. And probably one of the most patient backs in the league is Le'Veon Bell. And if he gets out there and he can do his thing, then I don't think there's any way the Dolphins are going to do it. The Dolphins have a high-paid defensive line, and they just really haven't stepped up. And I think they turned it around a little bit after a slow start. But against somebody like the Steelers, I just don't see anybody stepping up and getting in Le'Veon Bell's face and just really putting a big hit on him or anything like that, because not many people can. And Le'Veon Bell, great feet, big guy. You can't just come up in the open field and usually lay a huge hit on him. And the Dolphins, I just think on the road, they're not going to be good with Matt Moore starting. Jay Ajayi, can he pick apart a defense? And I know that he's your key to success for the Dolphins. And if he can run for 200 yards, sure, I'm sold on it. But I just don't see it. And especially in the playoffs, those crowds are going to be crazy, waving those terrible towels. And those terrible towels were pretty terrible when I went to the Super Bowl back in 2006. I hated looking at them. But it should be intimidating for the Dolphins to go from warm Florida up to potentially freezing Pittsburgh and try to get a win out of this. And I just don't see it. I'm taking the Steelers in this one. What about you?
Yeah, that was great analysis, Brian. It's going to be rough for them. This is another one of those inexperienced teams heading against one of the most experienced teams. And the thing about the Steelers offense is that they are lethal at every level. Like you were talking about, Le'Veon Bell, arguably, I believe, the best running back in the NFL today. And Antonio Brown, is hard to argue that he's not the top wide receiver in the game, no matter how you look at it. And then Ben Roethlisberger, a champion multiple times, knows how to get it done, especially in a playoff atmosphere, has beaten some of the greats, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, in his quest for championships. And then they're coached by Mike Tomlin, one of the great minds in the NFL today. So it's going to be tough. The Dolphins have a coach that hasn't been there really before. They have a quarterback that's never done anything really. Matt Moore, not a real great NFL quarterback. And Jarvis Landry is going to try his best to really get the receiving game going. But, looking at his stats, he had a nice year, but he really struggled all season long. When the Dolphins started to find successes, when they got the ball out of the quarterback's hands, their offensive line is playing great. Matt Moore sacked only one time in the last 3 weeks. And it was the same thing early on in the season. They were relying heavily on Tannehill to pass the ball and try to get Jarvis Landry going, see if he could ignite their team like Odell does over there in New York. And they just weren't able to do it. Tannehill just doesn't have the arm that some of the elite top quarterbacks do. And once they got the ball out of his hand and got it to a Jay Ajayi, who is the key to any game for the Dolphins, 4-0 when he rushes for over 100 yards, 3-0 when he rushes for over 200, obviously. But the offensive line, Laremy Tunsil and the rest of those guys have to get it going, have to control the line of scrimmage, because if they do, then they have a good chance. They have a good chance of keeping it close in Pittsburgh. But I think the Steelers offense has way too many weapons for this Dolphins defense, and it's going to be a rough outing. So I had the Steelers winning anyways, and that's why I said that the Texans or Raiders will be going to New England, because the Steelers are the higher seed. So I think that they will not be going to New England, and it's going to be a long afternoon for the Dolphins. I think potentially, if I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I think the largest margin will be this game because I think the Steelers just have too much everything for the Dolphins in this one.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh's favored by 10 points in that one. They're the biggest spread of the week, so I don't really see the Dolphins even covering that spread of 10 points, but we'll see if Matt Moore can come out and light it up. I don't think so, but moving on to probably the marquee matchup of the week, New York Giants versus the Green Bay Packers, two teams that are real hot to end the season, and nobody really wants to play them right now. Who do you got in this one?
Well, I think I'm going to have to go with the Giants, and I'm not trying to hate on the Packers. The Packers are playing really good right now, great even. Aaron Rodgers, 40 touchdowns, 7 picks on the season, and he's been balling lately. 19 touchdowns and 1 turnover, not even an interception, just a strip sack fumble, I believe. 19 no picks in the last 10 weeks. It's been absolutely insane what he's been doing. And the team is going as he was going. He had a slow start. He wasn't completing a lot of passes. He was turning the ball over more than usual. I don't want to say a lot. He finished the season with 7 picks, so obviously it wasn't a lot. But it wasn't anything that we were used to seeing as fans of the game. Aaron Rodgers, slow start. Packers, slow start. They actually didn't even lead their division until this very last game. So, we all saw it, and the defense has been Swiss cheese all year, been allowing a ton of points, not impressive. Clay Matthews has not been elite this year. Clinton Dix leading the team in picks, but also hasn't been dominating at any level of the game. And their run game has been the only thing that's been a question mark these last couple of weeks. They've been winning games, so that's the most important thing, but their continuity in the running game is really what I have struggled with, and I'm sure that obviously they're doing fine with it, but there's no one week it's Ty Montgomery, next week it's Christine Michael, and next week who knows who is going to be. So that's the one thing with the Packers team that you just don't know week after week, but they're playing well enough to win. Rodgers is playing at the top of his game right now, and I believe a 4-touchdown performance last week, and also dominated the Seahawks at home a couple weeks ago. So they're playing great right now. 2 playoff teams right there. They beat, and they got everything going for them right now in the playoffs. But over on the other side, the New York Giants playing very well. Odell Beckham Jr., arguably the best, right next to Antonio Brown as the best wide receiver in the game. And his pace is insane. Only 3 years in the league, over 4,000 yards, over 30 touchdowns, 35. He's the comparisons for Jay Rice and Megatron are going to be coming shortly. He's the pace that he started off his career with is absolutely insane. It's way ahead of anybody to ever play the game. But as all records, as all greatness, you have to have it has to be year after year. It has to be, you have to have the longevity, and we'll see. Right now, he's playing with a really good quarterback, but it all depends on which Eli Manning is going to show up. Is it going to be Eli Manning that throws 4 picks and can't get Odell the ball, or is it going to be the Eli that hits David Tyree over the middle above his head, catches it on his helmet, and beats the undefeated Patriots? It all depends on how this first game goes, because Eli in the playoffs, it's all or nothing. If they lose the first game in the season, they're out. If they lose the first game in the playoffs, obviously they're out. But if Eli ever won a game in the playoffs, he always goes and wins it all. So obviously he has 2 Super Bowls. So he won those first 2 games, and wild cards, I believe, both times. And I can see them going into Lambeau and beating the Packers. Their defense, nobody's really talking about the Giants' defense. They're if the Texans and the Seahawks are a close 1-2, then the Giants are sneaking right behind them at that number 3 spot. So don't be surprised if the Giants are. I don't think they'll shut down Aaron Rodgers. Great players. I don't think you can ever shut them down. You can contain them, and I think that they'll be able to contain them. The Giants' run game, not impressive. If they can get 60, 70 yards, it'll be very nice for them. But I think it's going to have to be all on Eli and what he can do with his trio of wide receivers, who I thought would, although they're at 11-5, that's pretty good. I thought they'd be more of a 12-4, 13-3 team with the trio of receivers they have. It's impossible to stop all 3 of those guys. And with Odell playing at the level that he's at right now, there should be plenty of one-on-ones for Sterling Shepard and Victor Cruz down the field, and I could see them having a heyday against this Packers secondary that's just awful.
So yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you for this one, and it's just one of those things. You look at it, Green Bay and New York, I feel like, are both the same team right now coming down the stretch. They're both super hot going into the playoffs, but they both ended up in a wild card spot. The Giants, due to Dallas winning the division and Dallas just being that much better record-wise. Then you got the Packers, who just surged and ended up taking over the Lions and pretty much kicking them out of the division, making them get a wild card and go to Seattle. But for this one, I'm going to agree with you, and I'm going to go with the Giants. And when you look at it, this one's going to be chippy. It's supposed to be 12 degrees at kickoff with a wind chill of 1. So it'll essentially be like playing in 1-degree weather. Pretty much the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field is going to come into effect. But the Giants should be used to this. They're in New York. New York gets snow. New York gets cold. And it's not like somebody like Houston or Miami going up there, or even Los Angeles if the Rams were in the playoffs, which that's laughable just being even brought up. But it's not a warm weather climate team going up to Lambeau or playing at Chicago or one of those just frozen tundras that are in pretty much nothing with no buildings around to block the wind. The wind's just going to come straight through into the stadium. That's going to be a crazy one. But then when you're looking at it, Green Bay plays real well at home, but the Giants have beat the Cowboys twice this year. Nobody thought anybody could do it. The Giants knew exactly what the Cowboys were going to do. Sure, it was a division opponent, but then they go up against them. And in the first loss, then beat them again. They beat them at home and at Dallas. So I think they can play well on the road. It's just going to come down to who's going to be able to throw the ball. And I think this one's going to be similar to the Russell Wilson at Minnesota. He can't throw the ball deep. He can't really do anything, and neither team really can. And there was really no offense in that game last year at Minnesota just based on how cold it was. And when you got a wind chill of 1, you're going to be seeing a lot of the same thing. So I think if Eli can go out there, maybe get some short passes going, and I think with the quickness of Odell, quickness of Sterling Shepard, that's going to be the difference in the game. And also, the Lions exposed the Packers secondary last week. The secondary was looking real weak, and the Lions just didn't pursue it for the whole game. And I was a little disappointed, and they would get in the red zone and end up throwing a pick on the goal line. But if you send guys deep, they were burned all day, and the Lions guys just couldn't come up with it. The passes weren't on target. But if Eli can do that and these guys can burn it and he can make that throw in the cold, it should be a win for the Giants. So I'm going to take the Giants in this one. But Aaron Rodgers, historically very good, and ever since he's entered the league, he's just been unstoppable, except in Seattle when they rely on an onside kick to come back and beat them. And a Hail Mary. I won't call it a Fail Mary. I'll call it a Hail Mary to Golden Tate. They beat them that time too. But Green Bay, I feel like everybody's just kind of writing them into the next round based on them having a home game and them playing well down the stretch. But I'm with you. I think the Giants do it. And for some reason, I just think the Giants are the better team right now, even though Green Bay finished the season 6-0 to win the division. I think their time has come, and they watched game film on that Lions game last week. They'll see that the Packers defense was exposed and their corners are weak. You can pick on them all day. Slant routes, deep routes, whatever it is, you can get them all day. And I think they can do it. And I just don't see somebody like Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams going out and picking apart New York or anything like that. And Christian Michael probably going to be tripping over his own feet like he did with Seattle. Ty Montgomery he's actually looking pretty good out there. But I think if there's a team that can stop somebody, it is New York. And it's a bad first-round matchup for Green Bay because anybody else on this list, I think Green Bay wins that game, especially at home. But New York, I'm going to say, gets them in this one.
Yeah, so that wraps it up for that. But I want to talk about who do you think some of these key players in each matchup will be. Let's, if you want to go back to the beginning, we can start with the Raiders-Texans game. I know we both had the Texans winning this game, but who do you think will be a key or the key in the Texans' victory?
I think it's got to be Brock Osweiler. If he comes out and he throws 2 picks, 3 picks, especially pick sixes, that's going to give the Raiders easy points. Then they're going to have to claw themselves out of a hole with really essentially a backup quarterback in Brock Osweiler starting. And if he comes out there and he just plays terrible like he did when he got benched, that's really going to be the key in the game. Not Brock Osweiler playing good, Brock Osweiler managing to limit his turnovers, because that's been his weakness. And he gets all this money. He comes out there and he thinks that he's just going to take over the show like he did in Denver. And then he comes out, finds out it's not the same. And a lot like Matt Schaub, he's looking just like him with Houston, and they both just come out and throw big picks late in the game. And if it's close and he comes and turns the ball over, Oakland ends up winning. So I'm going to take Brock Osweiler as my key player for that game, and I think the game's really going to be in his hands. And then on the other side, it's going to be Connor Cook, because he's likely to start, and if he can't move the ball, then it's just going to be an easy day for the Texans. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lamar Miller. I like your Brock Osweiler pick. It is going to depend on what Osweiler does, but I think when it really comes down to it, controlling the clock is going to be key. Actually keeping the ball out of Osweiler's hands is where I'm going with it. I think if Lamar Miller can get those big third down runs, continue to keep the clock rolling, continue to keep drives going, get the kicker on the field, and really not force Brock Osweiler to throw 40 or 50 or even 35 passes in a game, to just run the ball down their throat and to control the clock, because I think that'll be what the Raiders try to do. I don't think that they're confident that Connor Cook or McGloin, who I'm sure Cook will play, but you never know. It's only Thursday. And I think that they'll try to give it to their three-headed rushing attack as well, and try to, have the same game plan. I don't think this is going to be a blowout game. It's going to be a field position game, field goal kicking. I think it's going to be a close one. And I think Lamar Miller, the best back that'll be on the field, arguably the best offensive player on either team on the field. And I would give it to Amari Cooper and the Raiders receivers, but it's hard. It's hard to get the ball if you're that talented. You have to have a good pass thrower, and they just don't. They don't have one, especially going up against the Texans defense it's a stout defense. It's great in the pass. It's great against the run. And so you're going to have somebody that's elite. And I don't think McGloin or Connor Cook has the ability to beat this defense. It's just not going to happen. So I'm going Lamar Miller and their ability to control the ball. And on the other side, it's going to have to be Cook. Like I said, you have to be elite. He's got to have the best game of his life. Realistically, it's got to be, he got to play out of his mind. He's got to have one of those Joe Flacco type playoff runs where it's just the best football he's ever played, and gets, $20-30 million deal at the end of this playoff run, because they have to pay him. It'll be no choice. But that's the only reason I don't see the Raiders winning this one, is because they have to have their quarterback play out of their mind going up against this great defense, and it's going to be rough, especially if Lamar Miller is able to move the ball against this Raiders defense that isn't that good. So I'm going with Lamar Miller, and I'm going with Connor Cook on the other side. But heading into this Lions-Seahawks game, we both chose the Seahawks. Yes, it's official. I'll write it down. And who do you have as your key to the game for these teams?
Yeah, we talked about Matt Stafford and how he can go out and light it up, and how we're going to be watching for him. But on the other side of the ball, I think that's going to be the biggest difference, is how much pressure the Lions can put on Russell Wilson. And we've seen the Seahawks offensive line just go out there and really be, like you said earlier, Swiss cheese when you're referring to a defense. And that's how they've looked in some games. And I think I'm going to go with Ziggy Ansah for this one. And you got Tahir Whitehead on the other side, and he's already proven himself. He's, I think, top 10 in the league right now for tackles, and he's proved that he can actually step up on this defense and make some tackles. But Ziggy Ansah has not been what he was last year, and I think if he's going to make any sort of difference, it's got to come in the playoffs. So he's going to be my key to the game for Detroit. If he can get some pressure on Russell, force some turnovers, I think that's going to be the biggest thing the Lions can do. And you saw him get some pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and then he just take off and run. I think they need to plug those holes on the defensive side of things, and the defensive ends and the linebackers need to come up and actually put pressure on Russell Wilson. Like Aaron Rodgers got out and ran. There was a linebacker right there. He'd run right by him. And you can't really have that happen if you're in the playoffs and you're trying to get a win. So I'm going to say Ziggy Ansah coming off the defensive line is probably the biggest thing for the Lions, and he's got to step up, earn his keep. And then on the other side of the ball, Russell Wilson, I don't see the offensive line just shutting down the Lions defense. And although the Lions don't have a whole lot of pressure on their defensive side, I think they can get some pressure on Russell, and he's going to have to roll out, make things happen. And I know that we both know that Russell Wilson can escape, and he said that he might ditch the knee brace this week. So if he doesn't have that knee brace on, I think Russell Wilson's the key, and Ziggy Ansah is the key on the other side.
Yeah, I agree with you. Russell Wilson is the key, but not for my key. I'm going with Jimmy Graham. Obviously, to get Jimmy Graham the ball, it has to be Russell Wilson. But I think getting Jimmy started, it's the reason we traded a first-round pick. Not only a first-round pick, we also got rid of Max Unger, our center. So we got to do something. We have to make it worthwhile, and this is Jimmy's time to shine. We had major success in the middle of the year. We were leaps and bounds. I think we had like a 4-game lead in the NFC West, and it was domination, and it was all because of the connection that Russell and Jimmy had. And so, yes, obviously Russell is the key to the game, but I'm saying specifically to Jimmy Graham is for the Seahawks side. The defense will show up, so don't have a real key there. They're all just going to play. And then on the other side, I think the Lions, Ansah is a good pick, but I think, like you said, if Russell ditches that knee brace, I don't think there's any defensive lineman that could get to Russ and really cause havoc for him. And I'm going to have to go with big play Slay, simply because if he's able to make plays back there, if he's able to cause and create turnovers, lock up Doug Baldwin, it's going to be a long day because the Seahawks don't really have a solid number 2. Jimmy Graham is supposed to be that guy, but if he's in blocking or running little – I don't know, whatever routes that Bevel draws up for him that don't do anything. I'm not very confident in Jermaine, and I'm not confident that McAvoy can fill that void just yet. Maybe he can. It's not something a role that he's played yet. I'm excited to see what Paul Richardson could do, but I don't want to say that he is the key just yet. I think Jimmy is a much more viable key than Paul Richardson is. But if I could just make up my own rules on this one, I would say P. Rich is my second, my sleeper pick, if you will. So I'm making up my own rules on that one, and I'm going with Jimmy with a sleeper pick, Paul Richardson as well. And the big play Slay is going to have to cause some turnovers and really shut down Doug and create a way for the Seahawks to beat them some other way than to go to Doug, because everyone knows the connection between Russ and Doug is a special connection. And it's not just in Seattle. People around the league know Doug Baldwin and Russell Wilson. So if he can do a great job in shutting down Doug and force the Seahawks to go elsewhere with the football, that's going to be the key to a potential not very likely Lions victory.
All right, and then moving on to the Dolphins at the Steelers. I think we both agreed in the beginning, Jay Ajayi is going to be really the key to winning that game. Like you said, when he goes 100 yards or more, they're 4-0, and when he rushes for over 200, they're 3-0. So Jay Ajayi is really going to be a huge pick, but also the Dolphins' defensive line. I think the Dolphins' whole defensive line needs to step up. They need to get some pressure on Big Ben, and if there's no pressure and if they're playing like they did at the beginning of the season, it's just going to be an easy day for Ben Roethlisberger, and I think the Dolphins defensive line really needs to show why they're getting paid this much money, and they need to step up, get some pressure on them. And I'm not going to pick one guy. I'm not going to say Williams or Sue needs to step up. They all need to work together and get some pressure on them. But I'm going to go with Jay Ajayi for the key for this game. And on the Dolphins side of the ball, and Le'Veon Bell. I think Le'Veon Bell can just run over anybody, and I don't think there's anybody that's really going to stop him on the Dolphins end, and unless he's going up the middle. And that defensive line steps up. So the defensive line going to be a huge part of it. Jay Ajayi is going to be my pick for the Dolphins. Le'Veon Bell on the other side. But like you said, Antonio Brown can pretty much torch anybody in the game. So you can pick just about anybody as the key for the Steelers. But I'm going the backs in this one, Jay Ajayi and Le'Veon Bell.
Very nice picks. I'm going with the pick that you had for the defense. But I'm going to say Ndamukong Suh. He's got to be worth the money. This is why they paid him so much money when they got to the postseason, that he could control the line and carry them to victory against the good teams. This is the good teams, and he's really got to shut down Le'Veon Bell and really has to disrupt the pass. He's got to play the best game of the season, and obviously he has the talent to do it. I think that he's the best defensive lineman in the game. Right up there with J.J. Watt. It's hard to argue not. The defensive tackle doesn't really get sacks like a defensive end does. So statistically, they're not the same, but game changer, they're right there. They're one and the same. They demand double, triple teams from lines and open up blitzing gaps for linebackers. So Sue has to have his best game, and I think that he's up for the challenge. So I'm going with Sue. Lamar Miller, obviously not Lamar Miller, Jay Ajayi on offense. Yeah, we already talked about that earlier. And then for the Steelers, it's got to be it has to be Le'Veon. If he can create, anytime you get the running game going, it opens up the passing game, and you have arguably one of the best future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Ben Roethlisberger, and definite Hall of Fame wide receiver Antonio Brown. No issues there. They're going to connect, and you really have to speed up Roethlisberger's clock. If Sue can get in there and speed up his clock and force him to make quick decisions, turnovers, it's nothing new to Ben Roethlisberger. He's used to all of that. He can make great passes with on the run and getting hit, and he's a beast. He's a monster. You could get hit in the chest and throw 50, 60-yard touchdown. That's why he's Ben Roethlisberger. But I think that it's going to be key for Le'Veon Bell to get going, because if that run game gets going, they're going to be absolutely unstoppable. And not even just this game, throughout the whole playoff run. I'm excited for I think in the AFC Championship game, it'll be them and the Steelers. And to be honest with you, as a Seahawks fan, I'll be excited to see either one in the Super Bowl. Personally, I would like to see the Patriots there, but they don't really impress me. We'll talk about them later. Obviously, we're getting a little bit off topic, and for the Steelers, I think that their defense will be fine. I don't think there needs to be any specific player that needs to stand out on defense. I don't think that the Dolphins' offense will have an easy time moving the ball regardless. I think maybe Ryan Shazier, maybe. But I don't think that anybody – it doesn't matter which defensive player, just as a unit, just stop the run, and then that's pretty much game over. And, so that's about it. But for the last game of the evening, the Giants and the Packers, who are the keys to this game?
Well, the keys to this one for the Giants, Eli, if he's just out there throwing picks all day, it's going to be an easy day for the Packers, because you are in the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. The crowd's going to be crazy. The weather's going to be cold. And if he goes out there and just throws up ducks all day, it's not going to be good. So Eli, I think he's got to prove that he's elite, and he's got to prove that maybe he's as elite as his brother is. And I know Peyton went out on a high note, and Eli's got to follow that. And Eli's got to prove that he can be just as good as Peyton under pressure, and he has in the past, but can he still do it is the question. I think the Packers at Lambeau Field is always the biggest test in the playoffs, because they play so well there. So I'm going to say Eli is the key to this one. We know what their receivers can do. Can Eli get him the ball? And can he throw the ball deep when it's this cold out? And I don't think he really can, but he can probably throw it deep enough. If the receivers can get separation after 25, 30 yards, he can probably throw it about that far. But I don't see him bombing them 50, 55 yards, anything like that. But I think he's going to be the key, just making smart decisions. And on the other side of the ball, I'm going to go with the Packers secondary. The Packers secondary really did not impress me at all last week against the Lions. And like I said, the Lions just didn't pursue that, and they couldn't make those plays. Tate was wide open, dropped a ball, and then you had one on the other side, I believe, deep shot down the sideline, and they drop it again. Anquan Bolden dropped one. They just couldn't really capitalize on it, and the Packers were getting burned all day. And the Lions just couldn't catch the ball and couldn't pinpoint that pass right. So if Eli can do that, then Giants win this one. But if the Packers secondary can step up, then maybe the Packers can shut them down and end up winning the game. So I think it's a tale of two sides here. Eli on the offensive side, and then the Packers secondary is going to be, I guess, my key players for the game. What about you?
I'm going with Odell Beckham Jr., which obviously you have to have good quarterback play if the wide receiver is going to have success. So, yes, Eli is the obvious one. But I'm going with Odell. This is just based off of legacy. If Odell wants to be considered one of the greatest, he's got to compete with Jerry Rice and the greats. I mean, all you have to do is enter the conversation, and people will tell you all day why you're not as good or why you're better. But to be in the conversation, Jerry Rice, his first year in the playoffs, went all the way to and won the Super Bowl, had a great year, his best playoff season of his career, and that's kind of what he has to do. He has to make himself a presence, and he is a presence week after week with all his dancing and touchdown celebrations, and people have whatever to say about it, but you have to stop the guy if you want him to stop celebrating. That's task number one. The reason that he does celebrate so much because he's really that good. He just gets to the end zone, he makes plays, and he makes Eli look a lot better than he plays a lot of the time. And so I think this is Odell's time to shine, and he's going to have to in Lambeau. I guarantee there's going to be a Lambeau leap from Odell when he scores. It's just that's who he is. It's you just have to know what you're dealing with. And there's been a couple guys that have tried it. Ochocinco and T.O. and Odell is right there with them, if not just as talented, if not better. So it's going to have to be him. Offensively, defensively, it's going to have to be Landon Collins. Landon Collins arguably had one of the best years for a safety of all time. And I don't think that he's better than Earl Thomas or anybody like that, but a very, very, very good, solid young player, regardless of how you want to look at it. And he's going to have the game of his life against one of the best quarterbacks of our time. And, on the other side, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the key to the game. That offense is absolutely garbage without Aaron Rodgers. And with him in the game, his ability to not only throw the ball downfield, pinpoint accuracy, precision, his ability to run on third and short, third and long. He can get it done on the ground. He can do it all. And, you're heading into his hometown, his home territory. He's used to the cold. He's used to the snow. He practices in it every single day. It's nothing to him. So he's the key. And then I'm going to have to agree with you. If Odell's going to be the key for the Giants, it has to be anybody, absolutely anybody, Clint Dix, whoever you want it to be, anybody on that Packers secondary is going to have to be key for that defense because Odell is coming. And if he's not coming, then Shepard, who's been a sleeping giant, if you will, he's right there with him. And, you lock down those two, and Victor Cruz, who was Odell before Odell was Odell, is also somebody to reckon with. So Eli has a lot of weapons. Obviously, like you said, perfect pick. Eli is going to have to depend on how he plays, but more specifically, it's got to be to Odell or one of those receivers. And the Green Bay secondary has to be ready because they're bringing it all game long. And that's the picks, man.
Yeah, and it should be fun going into the wild card weekend. I know sometimes we don't always get to see the Hawks play wild card weekend. It was a little bit weird. Last year came down to that field goal, and this year I'm excited for it. I hope it doesn't come down to a field goal this time, and I hope it's either a blowout one way or the other, so I don't have to be crushed when Megatron fumbled on the goal line last time. Hopefully it's not Golden Tate or Marvin Jones Jr. that fumbles the ball on the goal line this year, but, it should be exciting, and I'm hoping the Seahawks pull it out. But like I said before, if the Lions end up winning, they need it more than the Hawks do at this point. It is what it is, but I will be there in my Rawls jersey. Should be exciting. And then the rest of these matchups, I'm looking forward most to the Giants at the Packers, other than the Seahawks Lions. And I know probably a little bias due to the fact we're both NFC fans, but should be a great football week. And I know we're probably going to be back at it next week, hopefully with some good news. And I know it'll be good news either way for me, but probably good news for both of us next week. And analyzing some matchups, it'll probably be Seahawks at Falcons, and then you got Green Bay or New York at Dallas, which that'll be crazy too. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in this one, but it will be crazy to say the least. And all these games, chance of snow in Seattle on Saturday. So see what happens. And I know a lot of these games are supposed to be cold, so looking forward to it.
All right, I'm looking forward to it as well. Well, everybody, Go Hawks! Playoff time. We're here. Also excited for all the games, and we'll see you next week with the updates and the better teams, if you will. So we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Peace.